let's talk about the JW Anderson news because, why not? I mean, JW Anderson news is probably the most like we already knew that was gonna happen. Like we've been talking about this forever. Nothing new there, nothing surprising. Now we're just waiting for him to take over Dior, to be honest. So, nothing too crazy there. But let's cover it. Let's cover it. We can cover it, guys. As if it wasn't more obvious who's going to Dior. I mean, yeah, we've been talking about JW Anderson, exiting Loewe for a while. But I mean, it's interesting because I think that JW Anderson had an amazing run. Of course, from everything from the surrealist inspirations that he was doing at a point, and those heels and stuff were, really, really strong and really, really good. They sold really well, like the balloon, but as a heel, or even things like commercially, like the puzzle bag, that was insane. And JW Anderson does make a good bag. I mean, his own brand, he's famous for things like the Pierce bag, for example. For those of my lads, because obviously you guys might not be so into bags, but I'll show you guys what the puzzle bag looks like, just in case you don't know what it looks like. It's one of the most iconic modern Loewe bags, but this is the Loewe puzzle bag. This is a mini one. But yeah, this was like one of the most famous Loewe bags. So the puzzle bag. So he just did so well. Also, what I really loved about JW Anderson's Loewe, and I've talked about this when I've reviewed a lot of Loewe shows. You guys can watch back. Literally just type in Loewe runway review fashion roadman, it'll probably come up. I love his inspirations of art history. I always say this, and I'll say this again. Something I've always loved about JW Anderson's work is the fact that sometimes he references really obscure art, and I learn a lot because in reviewing runway shows, I have to really understand what they are referencing. So if they reference an artist, I need to go learn about the work of that artist first before I do the review. And I learn about things that I didn't really know about. And it's in stark contrast to most designers that reference the most obvious run-of-the-mill artist art history periods. So that's something I've always appreciated about JW Anderson. He'll take like really obscure books and reference that, or obscure like films. He also is very inspired by film, obscure films that I've never heard of in my life, and I'd have to literally watch the film to do the review, and they're actually really interesting things. So I think he has an interesting taste just in things in general, in art history, in films, and that kind of shows itself in his Loewe, and it did show itself in his Loewe when he was there. Also, thank you so much, by the way, for the super chat. Take this for the after hours, my good sir. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate it. Okay, JW Anderson is the best British designer in British history. No, that would be Alexander McQueen. That would definitely be Alexander McQueen. I think skill-wise or just designer-wise, if I was to do like, in order, best British designer of all time, Alexander McQueen first, John Galliano second, then it gets really difficult because now there's so many designers that I could put like third, fourth. There's so many. Oh my gosh. There, yeah, I'm stuck on after McQueen and Galliano. I'm just stuck. You can mention names like Worth. I knew people were mentioning Westwood, but the reason why I didn't want to say like Westwood and stuff is because like how far back are we going? And then can we mention people like Worth, like Charles Frederick Worth and stuff like that? Because if we open that kind of worms, it gets really difficult very quickly. So between Worth, between Vivienne Westwood, exactly, fashion starts with Worth, so he counts. That's why I said I knew people would say Vivienne Westwood, but I immediately was like, okay, McQueen, Galliano. Now we've got Worth, we've got all the Savile Row people, and how valid do we put them in this conversation? So we've got the likes of like Oswald Boateng, even Paul Smith, who's very iconic historically. There's so many names that you can start throwing around after those top two, in my opinion. But JW Anderson is definitely like in the mix of those designers for sure. But to me, I definitely think you might disagree with me, and that's fine. It's subjective, but I think the greatest British designer of all time is McQueen, and it's going to take a monumental effort for there to ever be a better British designer than McQueen, in my personal opinion. I think we're going to have a very hard time ever talking about a designer, to me personally, that's better than McQueen. Yeah, Molina, Stella McCartney. Yeah, so like I said, there's just so many. Someone said Kim Jones. I think he's definitely in the mix too. So yeah, It's insane. Can you tell me why McQueen is so revered? Oh my god, where do we start? So part of the reason why a lot of, let's say, older couturiers are really respected is because of their actual like design skill. And their design skill showed themselves in different ways. They were also always on the cutting edge of design, right? So you have designers like Schiaparelli that was using materials that at the time were seen as futuristic and incorporating them into her garments. Or you have the likes of Christopher Balenciaga that was creating his own silhouettes. Same thing with McQueen. McQueen did a lot of, and by the way, creating your own silhouette is tough. Like you have to be good at tailoring. You have to be good at pattern making. You have to be really, really skilled to do that. That's why Yohji is very respected, because the skill that it takes to create your own silhouette in that way is really difficult. Same thing with McQueen. He made his own silhouette of dresses, his own silhouette of trousers. The bumpsters are still iconic. And of course, people think of bumpsters in terms of like the most exaggerated form. But over the years, he did actually, work on the bumpster to make it like a viable thing that could be worn, the way it doesn't show that much of your bum crack. And that's actually really hard to do. And obviously, the only reason why McQueen even had the skills to do that is his background, right? The fact that he worked on Savile Row, the different people that he created patterns for. Like, he's a designer's designer. That is literally what McQueen is. And that is the case for when you think of the most iconic designers, like at least in my opinion, the designers that I think are the most iconic in terms of like design skill are the likes of Madeleine Vianney. You still have people like John Galliano geeking out over techniques that Madeleine Vianney used to use that he's just discovering at his age now. And this is another designer that is supremely skilled, right? So when I think of skill, I think of Alexander McQueen, Madeleine Vianney, Christopher Balenciaga, but there's few of them, like those designers that like are the pinnacle of like just garment construction, tailoring skill. There's very few. So that's why we hold, because McQueen is in that realm of designers. That's why we hold him to that high of a regard. Like he really is one of those. Like he's that skilled and he was that good. And there's like so few designers that I can say that about. Like that you could literally, like it's so few of them. So yeah, that's why McQueen is so revered. That's literally like McQueen is literally in the kind of what Luke is saying. He is literally amongst like greatest of all time designers. Like he is in that realm. And there's very few designers that are in that realm. Yes, McQueen is low-key unfuckwittable. Facts. Yeah. Givenchy was inspired by Balenciaga. Christian Dior used to marvel at what Balenciaga used to do with garments. I mean, just look at fashion history also, the way people used to refer to Balenciaga's work, like Chanel, the way she used to talk about Balenciaga's work and his skill. The fact that when he was young, really young, by the way, his like neighbor, the patron, the woman that later became his patron, made him copy a Paul Poiret dress, thinking that he didn't have the skills to copy it because he's just this young kid. How the hell could he copy it? And he just copied it with ease. Like that is who Christopher Balenciaga was. So yeah, there's few and far between, but he's one of those. Like Lee Alexander McQueen is one of those ones. Like he's one of those. So yeah, I hope that helps with why we hold him to that high of a regard. Why McQueen is, put in that on that level. Next man said, hate to be morbid, but I think the way he passed added to his folklore and irreverence. Yeah, that's a can of worms I don't want to open, but you guys can speak about that in the chat if you want. Yeah, and mind you, Chanel beefed with everyone. She did. Chanel did beef with everyone. She hated everyone too. And this is very true. Dior did call Balenciaga the master of us all. He definitely did. So yeah, but anyway, moving on. Let's talk about JW Anderson, guys. I feel like we went on a tangent. We're supposed to be celebrating JW Anderson at Loewe, guys. But reading on, Jonathan Anderson exits Loewe. Under the designer's tenure, the LVMH-owned Spanish house became one of luxury's hottest fashion brands, which is also something I want to do quickly is look at Loewe's website and see if they started what they normally do, pulling all of the best hits off of the website, because they better keep that stuff on the website because it's really good. And I personally love like what JW was doing at Loewe. I hope they keep all of it, like the heels with the balloons and like all that crazy stuff. Let's see, woman. What category do you want to look at? Let's look at shoes first. Shoes. It's got the funky sneakers. I was not really the biggest fan of those. I like more like the heels and stuff. Yeah, here you have the sort of like cartoonist, like pop art looking loafers, which is a very like Loewe thing to do because surrealism was a big theme during, especially later on, JW Anderson's tenure. Yeah, like stuff like this is really cool. These sort of toy mules, I was a big fan of those. Like even this, like these pumps with the knitted fabric, those also did really well financially. The slippers with sort of like a belt design is supposed to be like the belt hoop design, but just actual slippers, they're sandals. Really, really cool. Yeah, JW Anderson's fabric innovation was insane. And it was deliberate, obviously, because Loewe is, their main focus is leather. So one of his focuses was how many different ways can we recontextualize leather? So, you know, they were doing a lot of the leather effect things. They were doing using different types of leather and mixing different textures of leather to give a different effect. So that was also something I found really fun and interesting about his Loewe. Someone is saying not for the price though. Fair enough. Yeah, I also like the boot shape, like really, really round toe shaped boots. Yeah, I just think a lot of what JW Anderson did at Loewe was just such a hit. It was so good. And at Dior now, I think the problem with Dior is they haven't really had like a moment on the women's wear side. They've had a moment on the menswear side for sure. We talked about Kim Jones and his tenure at Dior, the oblique sneakers, the hardware when he was working with Yoon Ahn and Matthew Williams when they were doing the hardware, and the Elix buckle on the bags, and that was really crazy and sold like crazy. Like so much stuff that Kim Jones did at Dior, like the Jordan and Dior collab, all that stuff was selling really well. On the women's side, like Maria Gratacciuri brought back like some John Galliano stuff, like the saddle bag. She brought that back. That has been selling really well, but it's not really her design. They need a designer that can come in and really like create new products that really hit in the women's wear. I don't think Maria Gratacciuri has been able to do that. Of course, people say that, oh, but she sells well. But it's like, are her designs selling well? Or is that just a case of the big machine that is Dior because it's such a big brand, right? That when you walk into the Dior store, you can buy all the like Dior print stuff. And like, that's like the permanent collection stuff that has no real connection to what goes on the runway, right? So that's why I think they need someone to really bring that excitement to Dior, and it's going to sell regardless. Like the permanent collection stuff, like yeah, like the book tote, that's definitely a thing that was selling. But once again, it doesn't matter what designers there. There'll always be, you know, rich ladies in California that buy, you know, the book totes in the boatloads and stuff like that. So is that about the designer, or is that just a wider marketing machine of Dior? How would you differentiate between her selling well and just the machine based on what's selling? So if you look at what's selling at Dior, it's very much, obviously they have like a sensational fragrance line that sells like crazy on both sides, like women's and men's. But do you see people wearing Maria Gratacciuri runaway pieces when women wear Dior? Or do you see women wearing permanent collection Dior? When I see women wearing Dior, it's permanent collection stuff. It's the Dior stuff with all over prints. It's the Dior book tote with all over prints. It's the Dior sandals and slippers with horrible monograms. When Kim Jones, when you look at what men were wearing at Dior, it was the stuff that was literally going on the runway. I saw people wearing the oblique sneakers, those ones that look like Converses. I saw people wearing the same sheer like Dior logo shirts that were on the runway at that time. I saw people wearing the crossbody Dior bags. I saw people wearing what are they called? Those Dior runner sneakers that were on the runway. So it's kind of like, is there a correlation between what we see on the runway and what people actually wearing and what is actually selling in droves? I haven't seen that on the women's side compared to the men's side, which would lead me to believe that it's more the machine of Dior rather than Marie herself, you know, actually creating pieces that become hits in the zeitgeist. Like, I'll ask you guys in the chat, there's like 197 people. Can you point to like a certain silhouette that, or like item, like ready to wear piece that Maria Gratacciuri has designed that has been a hit, like as a thing, right? And you're not allowed to say book totes because that's permanent collection stuff. That's not necessarily like Maria Gratacciuri runway. I'll wait. I'll give you guys like a minute or so to give me like just one like clothing item that's really hit the zeitgeist in Maria Gratacciuri's tenure in Dior. Let me see what you guys say. Let's see. Actually, you guys are right. That did. So the We Should Be Feminist t-shirts, touche, that was actually a hit. That did capture the cultural zeitgeist. That did. Granted, there was a hot contradiction because the Dior talked about the fact that we should be feminist, but literally like made by exploited women. We've talked about the, the structure of like the infrastructure of Dior and how their factories work and how they use these third-party factories and how they're exploiting workers. So there's a massive contradiction when you're running a massive conglomerate that exploits women all over the place, and then you're pushing a message of women's empowerment. I don't think Dior is the perfect springboard to do that, but she did it anyway. And there was like a contradiction. But that being said, it was a hit though. The We Should Be Feminist t-shirt went triple platinum. Like that did go really well, to be fair. But once again, that's a t-shirt. Okay, someone is saying like the A-line dresses. So she does love an A-line dress, but I don't think it's caught on per se, like her A-line dresses. Someone said the Miss Dior trench coat. I can give you some, I can concede to that. I don't necessarily think her Miss Dior trench coats have captured the zeitgeist per se, but people do wear them. I see people wearing them more so on Instagram than in real life, but I do see people wearing those. MBC kept Dior in the zeitgeist through a stream of mild dramas that didn't hurt her at all. I'm a huge fan of Dior Beauty as well, by the way, but once again, that has nothing to do with Mira Gaudier. So yeah, she doesn't design fragrances. I love how she used all those women artists as decor for the stage and ignored it completely to make another 40 A-line dresses with a bell. She does love a shirt dress. She does, to be fair. Nothing about her is zeitgeisty. She's just safe and inoffensive and shepherd Dior through a stage of huge global expansion. Yeah, I totally agree with you. But what I'm saying is like, if they want to grow even more, they need someone that can balance the sales from the permanent collection with other new styles that actually sell more and lead to the sale of like adjacent Dior items, right? They definitely need that. So for sure. Holly says, yes, I'm not arguing against the numbers, but it says a lot about the consumers. Mainstream sells, Raslash Galliano are true talents, which doesn't sell. We know this. Oh, yeah. True. Facts. That's 100% true, by the way. That's completely true. Luke says, I just don't see how Anderson's sensibility fits with Dior at all. It's totally different. Is it though? Is it? I'm not sure. I mean, Anderson does have more of like, I don't want to say Demna because it's a bit more classy than what like the way that he memifies things, but JW Anderson does have that like playful surrealist side to him, and we saw that at Loewe. I mean, with like tomato bags and all this kind of stuff, right? But Dior is a bit more serious than that. I think Dior is a bit less playful than Loewe, so he can't be as playful at Dior considering the way he is at Loewe. I think Dior is a bit more serious, but I think he can do that though. I think he can definitely do that. I don't think that all he can do is the, surrealist playful thing. I think there's more in his locker. We've seen through his an eponymous label, he's been able to do so many different silhouettes over the years. So yeah, he will be overworked. I don't think he's going to be any more overworked than he was before, because doing Dior and JW Anderson, I mean, before he would be doing Loewe and JW Anderson, it's kind of like similar workload. Of course, there'll be slightly more work at Dior, slightly more collections, but I'm sure he can handle it. But designers are just, at this point, are just always overworked at this point. If you're not only at one brand, you're definitely overworked, for sure. So yeah. Let me see what else you guys are saying in the chat. Dior lip gloss slaps. Yeah, I just love Dior fragrances so much. I really, really love Dior fragrances. I don't think they would allow him to be extremely playful. They would let him be a little, but not completely. Yeah, I guess that's alluding to what I was saying earlier, in the sense that, Loewe is a bit more playful and it allows for more playfulness than Dior, which is, not as playful, and it's not, kind of what Luke is saying, it's not intellectual. Whereas JW Anderson is very intellectual with the way he designs. So it's slightly different. I can see that, but I think he can design a nice dress. Give some credit. I think he can design a fun and nice dress. He hasn't done much of that at Loewe. It's more he designs fun dresses more so than just like the perfect, dress that sculpts. He's not doing the Alaya thing. That's never been his MO, but he will have to lean more towards that for Dior for sure. It's funny how we're having this conversation. He's not even been announced at Dior, but I'm just making the assumption that he's going, to be honest. So yeah, but let's read the article, guys. Let's see what Vogue Business has to say. After an 11-year run, Jonathan Anderson is leaving. The house said on Monday it's experienced exceptional growth under his direction, and according to Chief Executive Officer Pascale Lepoivre, has risen to new heights with international recognition. While reflecting on the last 11 years, I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by people with the imagination, the skills, the tenacity, and the resourcefulness to find a way to say yes to all my wildly ambitious ideas, Anderson said in a statement. While my chapter draws to a close, Loewe's story will continue for many years to come, and I will look on with pride, watching it continue to grow, the amazing Spanish brand I once called home. So let's just skip all these, arbitrary statements from the execs. Oh, we always thought he would be great, and he had a great tenure. Yeah. The announcement comes after Loewe's co-ed presentation took place on the 10th of March. If Loewe's show was sorely missed in Paris this season, the lasting impression of walking through this exhibition was of just how much fun Anderson has had, wrote Sarah Moa. Oh my god, I'm coughing a lot. Let me actually put that Loewe thing on the screen because it's quite interesting. It was kind of like a best hits. It was kind of just reminding you of everything, every cool thing that JW Anderson has done at Loewe, which is kind of cool in a way, knowing fully well that he was leaving. But let me just show you guys. Give me 1 second. Runway, Loewe. Actually, instead of going on Vogue Runway, I think it'll be better to go on Instagram because they'll probably have a lot more of let's see what the description was. A scrapbook of ideas, things old and new that are gathered at random to be preserved as memories or to serve as inspiration. Devising the Fall Winter 25 collection, inspired by these ideas, unveiled at the Hotel de Maisons in Paris, Jonathan Anderson plays on Loewe codes and tropes such as trompe-l'oeil, distorted scales and volumes, all filtered through art and artisanal craft, which led to a collaboration with the Joseph and Annie Albers Foundation, which is essentially a lot of what he did at Loewe, sort of playing with volume. He does that all the time at Loewe. Also at his eponymous label, too. The boots were something that people are talking about a lot, distorted scales and volumes. And like he said, all filtered through art and artisanal craft, which is his stick. I spoke to it earlier that he's inspired by very obscure artists and art periods and films and stuff. And that's what I find the most interesting about his work. So I did kind of like it in a way. Even the tomato, once again, which was an iconic, JW Anderson pop culture moment. So I thought it was really cool. I thought it was fun. Here we have the surrealism once again, which was a key theme in his Loewe. To the mushrooms, typical JW Anderson Loewe. Typical. So yeah, but reading on. At Loewe's standout show during Paris Fashion Week's last September, Anderson received a standing ovation from many of his peers. Sarah Burton, Temoulier, Adrian Apialaza, Nicolas Di Felice, and Chris Van Ash all attended, as well as Delphine Arnault and actors Daniel Craig, Josh O'Connor, Greta Lee, Aya Debris, and Rob Lowe. So quick side note, because they mentioned Nicolas Di Felice. So funny enough, I've seen many names. This is complete side note, by the way. I've seen many names, be thrown around about who's going to Balenciaga. I think, was it Luke that said in the chat that it's mainly going to be like Daniel Roseby or Peter Moulier? Personally, I think that Nicolas Di Felice, I would love if he went to Balenciaga, because I have really enjoyed his Courage. Like, I'm such a fan of what he's been doing at Courage. Obviously, I think he had like the same like Jean-Paul Gaultier like guest collection also. But his Courage to me has really been flying under the radar, and I think he could do a sensational job at Balenciaga, especially like the sculptural shapes. That like he could just really do that at Balenciaga. But I don't know if he's like, a big enough name for Balenciaga, like what they're looking for. But as a journalist, as a critic, I'm a fan of his work. So when people are talking about names, like throwing names in the hat for Balenciaga, he was definitely someone that I was like, oh, he would be a really good fit. But yeah, moving on. That was just kind of quick side note because I'm like, every time I see Nicolas Di Felice's name, I'm like, yeah, he should go to Balenciaga. But anyway, the set for the show featured a sculpture by Tracy Yemen, a pole with a bird perched on top. According to the press release, the bird is caught in a moment of pause. She encourages us to imagine imminent flight and ultimately its freedom. The Northern Irish designer was appointed creative director of LVMH's own Spanish luxury house in September 2013. This is where I start to feel old. I'm like, oh my God, JW Anderson has been at Loewe for that long. That's crazy. That's actually insane. I feel old. I literally remember when he was announced. Like, that's actually insane. I'm like, I'm getting old. This is when I remember I'm actually pushing 30. When they're like, yes, he's been at the brand for like 14 years. I'm like, no way. No way. But reading, because they're just talking about like his background. On this channel, you guys would know about his background. Okay, they're talking about the history of Loewe. Also, not to, completely keep promoting Understitch, but Understitch has a sensational video on Loewe. So Loewe is, Loewe is, a brand with a very interesting and complicated history, and Understitch really delved deep and broke it down. So if you want to learn about the history of Loewe, Understitch has a sensational video about that. So definitely check that out if you're curious about. Diane said, don't make me laugh, you getting old. Obviously, old is a state of mind, Diane. It's like it's a state of mind, but obviously it just makes me realize that I'm no longer the 18-year-old that I once was. When I'm like, oh my God, JW Anderson has been at Loewe for that long. Oh my gosh. Like, that's crazy. That's so crazy. I feel like I'll always be a young soul. Even when I'm like, 50, 60, 70, 80, I feel like I'll be a young soul. So yeah, not aging himself. It is what it is. But let's read some of the figures. Under Anderson's tenure, sales went from 230 million euros in 2014 to 1.07 billion in 2024, according to Morgan Stanley estimates. Ready-to-wear took off. Anderson's collections were experimental, clean, but at the same time made for daily life. Meanwhile, leather goods went from strength to strength. He notably created in 2015, which I talked about earlier, the puzzle bag, which became a staple. He kept craftsmanship at the center and created the Loewe Foundation Craft Prize in 2016 to support and give visibility to vanishing crafts, which, once again, this is Anderson's stick once again. And I'm happy that he brought it to Loewe at his eponymous label. Something that he's known for doing is highlighting certain craftspeople, especially if it's like a craft that is, a dying breed. Very recently, and I talked about this very recently, but there was that collection where he was, let me see if I can get it on the screen for you guys. Do you guys remember this collection, right? This collaboration where he collaborated with the potters, the historic potters that used to make like Cornish ware, because obviously it's like a very famous like Cornwall style of pottery that was kind of a dying breed, and he almost made it like fashionable for a while. And like a lot of fashion people are like all of a sudden really interested in Cornish ware and buying that kind of pottery and stuff. And he was really highlighting the different, potters that make this stuff. So that's something I've always appreciated from JW Anderson, is this ability to highlight craftspeople and to also make sure that people are aware of the people that make these things and also give them some visibility and some publicity. So that's something that I'm also a big fan of when he does it. Shout out to Cornwall, my homeland. Yeah, so this was famous. I reviewed the Runaway show when it happened, but this was like a very, very famous collaboration that he did. He also had a store takeover where like these big teapots were at the window and stuff, but I digress. But yeah, they're talking about him being a 360-degree designer with a precise vision for brand building. Loewe campaigns like the one starring Maggie Smith, Jamie Dornan, and Daniel Craig always got people talking, which is true. That famous Loewe campaign, was that JW Anderson era? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? The Loewe. Do you guys remember that? Was that? I think that was Anderson era. That's so iconic, though. That's such an iconic, so iconic, so iconic. So yeah, he is a 360 designer, all the way from the campaigns to the leather goods to the accessories to the ready to wear to the fun, cultural zeitgeist moments. I think that Loewe had all of it, and I'm looking forward to what he does next. Probably Dior. We'll just have to see kind of where he goes with that, to be honest. And see, I think Galliano will never go back to his own brand. If he could, he would have done it back then. I think rather than going to Margiela, he would go back to his own brand. Fair enough. But I want to see what the future holds for him. We'll see. We shall see. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind the scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.